Welcome to Hampton Bay Stories. These stories are based on the Hampton Bay book series by Denise Nichols. If you enjoy this series, we invite you to subscribe to our channel or check out our books at your favorite online book retailer. This origin story is called Worthy. The sun hadn't quite risen yet. There was just a golden glow above the rooftops as April Howard slammed her apartment door shut with her free hand. In one arm, she cradled a laptop bag with dissertation research inside. On the other arm, she looped her daughter Lily's backpack, sneakers dangling off it by the laces. April's 2009 Corolla waited on the curb under the fading streetlight. She tugged her blazer jacket tighter. It was old, and it had barely held up since she was an undergrad. Then she opened the back door. Lily climbed in, and April placed the bags on the empty seat. This was the biggest day of her life. It was the culmination of 6 years of graduate work in environmental studies, cobbled together while raising her daughter Lily, teaching classes, and working part-time jobs. Her dissertation defense was scheduled at 9:30 a.m. Any delay was unthinkable. By 7:30 a.m., Lily had already been dropped off at school. April was on the road, whispering to herself the outline of her opening statement. April was barely holding it together. The old car's engine wheezed like it was dying. Then, just 3 blocks from the university campus, a silver luxury SUV surged through a red light at the intersection of Main Street and 2nd Avenue. It clipped April's front end at full speed, spinning her Corolla into a parked sedan with a sickening crunch of metal and glass. The airbag punched her in the face. For a moment, April could only hear the high-pitched tone in her ears. Then her world snapped back into focus. April sat facing the deflated airbag, her chest heaving, trying to remember how to breathe. Blood ran from a cut on the left side of her forehead. The windshield was cracked in a spiderweb pattern, and smoke curled from the hood. The SUV rolled to a stop halfway down the block. The driver door swung open. It was David Fair, a wealthy son of Virginia, who was a party boy and womanizer. April recognized him from the local news. He was the sole heir to the Fair construction fortune, notorious for 3 DUIs and counting, each one swept under a legal rug. He stumbled as he approached, drunk or pretending not to be. She smelled the whiskey from 5 feet away. "Damn, you all right, sweetheart?" he said with an accent thick and performative. April wiped her forehead. "You ran a red light." "I don't think so. You came out too fast," he replied. The police arrived in under 5 minutes. One of the officers, a broad-shouldered man with thinning hair and a tone like a disappointed dad, recognized Fair immediately. "Davids. You again," he muttered, exasperated but not angry. Fair grinned like a child who knew there'd be no punishment. April stood in disbelief as the conversation unfolded, casually, quietly, off to the side. The officer scribbled notes, but didn't perform a breathalyzer test. No cuffs. When she approached, the officer gently redirected her. "Ma'am, do you have insurance?" "Of course I do," April said. But he was drunk. "Do you have proof of that?" He stumbled out of the car. She asserted. "Mr. Fair says you ran the light. And he's not slurring," the officer replied. April scowled in defiance, but a glance at her phone revealed it was 9:06 a.m. If she didn't leave soon, she would miss her appointment. April took a step back from the cop, looking at her crumpled car, the steam rising from under the hood. "I have to go," she said hoarsely. "Do you need a ride to the hospital?" Fair asked. "I need to get to the university," April said, walking away to fight back the tears. She was called back by the police officer so he could finish his report. It was with a look of regret that he issued a citation to April. He looked mournfully at Fair. Then he watched April try to start her car. At 9:31 a.m., April stepped into the dissertation defense room wearing disheveled clothes. She was bruised, bleeding, and breathless. She apologized for being late and explained about the car accident. Her dissertation director's expression shifted from anger to concern. Taking a moment to compose herself, April presented her research. She answered questions with quiet fire in her voice, despite the pulsing pain behind her eyes. And when they passed her research, unanimously, April was surprised. It was rare to get immediate approval, but she didn't smile. She was just grateful it was over. She was called back by the police officer so he could finish his report. It was with a look of regret that he issued a citation to April. After taking time for a quick salad in the student union, April went to the parking lot to try start her car. The steam had stopped. And when she touched the car, she felt a coldness, like all the life had gone out of the vehicle. She turned the ignition, and there was no response. The engine did not even pretend to start. By 2 p.m., April, there was on a bus headed across town to pick up Lily. Her daughter's voice was the first thing that day that didn't feel broken. April gathered her daughter into her chest and used the moment as leverage to finish out her day. The next morning, Lily held her glitter-covered solar system project against her chest like a fragile treasure. "Mommy," she pleaded, "Mrs. Kane said I have to bring it." April knelt and zipped Lily's jacket up to her chin. Her temples throbbed. "We'll bring it tomorrow, baby." The glue's not even dry. April didn't have the energy to argue further. Her legs felt like wet sandbags, and her heart was beating too fast. One night's sleep hadn't undone the car crash, the police indifference, the empty bank account, or the echoing migraine that began following her dissertation defense. April and Lily hustled down the cracked sidewalk toward the bus stop, their breath clouding in the morning chill. Lily trailed behind with dragging feet. The bus squealed as it neared the curb with a hiss of brakes and diesel. April shepherded Lily on, dropping coins into the rattling fare box with trembling fingers. Her knees buckled slightly as the bus lurched forward. She gripped the nearest pole. Her vision blurred. Then the sunlight in the windows shimmered like water. "Mom?" April's hand slipped from Lily's. Then the world narrowed, a tunnel, dark and quiet. She awoke to a rhythmic beeping and the antiseptic scent of hospital air. She felt cool sheets and her mouth tasted like cotton. A figure stood beside her bed, tall, straight-backed, hair a mass of curls. He looked as though he'd been sculpted by a firm but generous architect. He was too fine, too neat, too composed. "Who are you?" she asked. The man smoothed his tie. "Mike Worthington of Donaldson and Bushido," he said. "We represent David's Fair." April blinked once, then twice. Then she turned her face toward the wall. Mike cleared his throat. "Miss Howard, the Fair family, regrets what happened. They asked me to give you this." From a manila envelope, he drew a check. It was more than she'd made in the last 2 years. She stared at the check for a heartbeat, not because of the amount, but what it meant. He was questioning her integrity, as though the money could make April change her mind about what had happened the day before. Then, April pushed Worthington's hand away, nearly knocking the check to the floor. "I don't want your blood money," she said. Mike flinched. It was just a flicker, but what April saw was real. He returned the check to the envelope, inhaling deeply in through his nose. "Miss Howard, the Fair family is very powerful. You don't know who you're dealing with." April turned slowly to face him. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Mr. Worthington. David's Fair killed a teenage girl last year. Did you pay off her family too?" Mike's jaw tightened. He pulled out a second check. The one had an amount more than twice the first check, and it was less insulting. "I will not be bought," April said. "I do not want your money. I want justice. For myself and for every family that spoiled brat has hurt." Mike opened his mouth, then shut it. "Miss Howard," he began. "You can leave," April said. He tried again. But April pushed the call button. A nurse appeared within moments. "This man is harassing me. Please call security." The nurse stepped forward, arms folded. Mike backed up toward the door with his hands raised. "I will leave. But you won't stand a chance in court." "I'll do fine," April said. "I have right on my side. Besides, I doubt that I am the only person who wants to see David's Fair face real consequences." Mike paused at the door, the bravado slipping from his posture. His gaze fell to the check in his hand. For the first time, Mike was unsure about the next course of action. He knew that April was not the only person in Virginia who wanted the Fair family to pay for their misdeeds. Later that morning, April was staring upward. The holes in the ceiling tiles swam above her like distant, blurry stars. Each heartbeat echoed behind her eyes. It was a dull throb that pulsed with every movement she made. The nurse, short and brisk, returned with a chart and a look of quiet worry. April tried to sit up, but her vision doubled. "Don't," the nurse said. "You have got a concussion. It is moderate, but you lost consciousness on the bus and again after you got here." April blinked slowly. "How long do I have to stay?" "For at least 48 hours. Probably longer." April looked down at her hand. Across town, Lily was clutching her stuffed rabbit and asking questions. The thought hurt more than the headache. "What about my daughter? Is she with a vet?" April asked. The nurse nodded. "Your housemate, yes. She came by while you were resting. She said she will take care of your daughter for as long as you need." April closed her eyes, relief folding over her like a thin blanket. Yvette was 22 years old and more night owl than caretaker, but she had always stepped up when it mattered. The door hissed open. A man in scrubs entered quietly, flipping through a clipboard. "Miss Howard, I am Dr. Kiefer. We have reviewed your scans. You had a mild brain bleed. It is stabilized, but it explains the blackout. You will need rest, limited screen time, no overstimulation, and absolutely no work for at least a week." April gasped. She had no car, no paycheck, and a mountain of student loan debt. Work wasn't optional. It was the key to their survival. Dr. Kiefer's voice softened. "I understand this may be hard to hear, but stress can make it worse. Head trauma is serious." April nodded mutely in response. She could not afford to make the situation worse. Later that night, Yvette called. "I dropped Lily off at school," she said. "She wouldn't let go of her project, so I guess it made the trip." April let out a deep sigh. "Is she okay?" "Lily is worried. But I've got her and I've got your back too." "Thanks. I owe you. You owe me like 30 frozen pizzas and a bottle of cheap wine. Don't sweat it." They hung up. April stared at her reflection in the window glass. She was bruised and tired. She had worked so hard, and now this. She almost felt like giving up and going home to her family. Then she remembered Mike Worthington and the check. It was a quiet threat. The Fairs didn't just want her silence. They expected it, but they would not get it from her. Across town, Mike returned to work. During the elevator ride, he replayed every second of the hospital encounter with April Howard, her bruised face, the fire in her eyes, the way she'd rejected not just the check, but him. She told Mike, "You don't know who you're dealing with." April seemed to see right through Mike's professional facade. She knew he was just an errand boy for the rich and powerful. Mike grimaced at the thought of what he had become in the pursuit of wealth and power. The elevator doors opened. The polished marble floors of Donaldson and Bushido's 23rd floor lobby gleamed under Mike Worthington's expensive Italian shoes. He had paid more for the shoes than the cost of the rent for his first apartment. Mike walked like a man headed to a sentencing hearing. Mike thought April would fold when she saw the second check. Most people did. It was the same ploy he always used. He tried to get David's off as cheaply as possible. If that failed, he offered double the amount. He stepped off the elevator, hoping to slip into his office unseen, but fate had other plans. Norm Bushido's junior assistant, Amy, spotted him immediately. Amy liked Mike. He had a good heart, but she hated that the firm used him to do their dirty work. "Mike," she said, as crisp as a paper cut. "Conference room." Mike's stomach turned. "Now?" he asked. She nodded regretfully as he changed directions. The hallway stretched forever as he walked. In the conference room at the end of the hall, the firm's heavyweights were waiting. Bushido, Lachlan, Dorn, and Archer were all standing around a room designed to intimidate. Laughter spilled out into the hallway. Mike took a deep breath and entered. He walked across the room. They were waiting to congratulate him. "Mr. Cleanup himself," chirped Lachlan, clapping once. "Did she take the first check?" Mike's mouth was dry. His usual smile wouldn't come. No one noticed except for Norm, a senior partner. Norm Bushido stood at the far end of the table, with his arms crossed. He was only 5 feet 9 inches, but he was sharply dressed and just as sharp-tongued. Norm frowned, and the smiles around the room faded. "Mikey," Norm said, voice sharp as glass. "What the hell?" Mike opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "You had one job," Norm continued. "She is a nobody. Just a poor single mom with no counsel. That's a small check problem. Mike started, then stopped. His pulse was loud in his ears. She what? She refused? So you walked out of there with your tail between your legs. She's not stupid, Mike said. She knew about the girl from last year and the settlement. She said, "Don't tell me what she said." Norm's voice didn't rise, but the silence that followed was louder than thunder. "She's a grad student who lives with a roommate," said Dorn. "We can make her go away with a single article in the Richmond Post. I can paint her as unstable, desperate, emotional trauma, maybe even mental health issues. We have the medical reports," he added. Mike's stomach turned again. "She passed out on a bus," Lachlan said. "That's gold." Mike shifted on his feet. He was growing anxious. "You're going to try to bury her," he exclaimed. Norm leaned forward and said, "We're going to protect the Fairs. Just like we protected the Brenners and the Sloans, that's what we do. You know that." Mike said nothing. Norm narrowed his eyes and leaned in. "Tell me, Mike, are you starting to care about this girl?" Mike looked over at the window. His reflection stared back. He looked clean-cut, but his was a dirty job. This was the job he thought that he wanted. He had worked hard for it, but this time was different. Mike's fists were clenched. "You've been here 3 years, Norm said. And you've moved faster than anyone I've seen. You've got potential, Mike, but don't confuse potential with importance." Mike said quietly, "She said she wanted justice. And I want a freaking martini, but I don't get one during business hours," Norm snapped back. The raucous laughter bounced against the mahogany walls. But Mike didn't laugh. His jaw tightened. His eyes drifted to the manila folder in Norm's hand. It was April's file. Every detail of her life was in that folder. There were facts and photos and whatever they could use to portray April as a villain. Mike had always known the game. But for the first time, he saw it for what it was, and he hated it. "Head out. Lachlan will take over," Norm said with a jerk of his head. Mike nodded and walked out. The laughter that followed felt like an assault on his manhood. He went to his office, gathered his things, and headed to his luxury car. That night, Mike didn't go home. He drove Interstate 64 past the boundaries of Richmond and toward the water. When Mike reached Hampton Bay, he parked, got out, and stood on a walk path next to the bay. He stood there watching the reflection of the moon on the water. Hampton Bay was a quiet community, and it reminded Mike of the life he had when he first finished law school. At that time, he worked as a legal aid representative in Greenville. The work was fulfilling, but he was exhausted and broke, with a mountain of law school loan debt. Then he moved to Richmond to join Donaldson and Bushido. They hired him because his clean-cut appearance was disarming. Most people trusted Mike. Whenever he offered a payoff, he came across as authentically concerned. In the 3 years he had worked at Donaldson and Bushido, he had nearly paid off his student loan, and he had a nice sum of money tucked away that he had planned to use as a down payment for a home. As Mike walked back toward his luxury car, he considered another option. He started the engine and thought, maybe he would start his own law practice. Mike slapped the steering wheel and got back on the road. A couple months later, they were back in court. Soft-soled shoes patted across the polished floor. The clerk and the bailiff whispered. Papers were shuffled. The judge had not yet arrived, but the machinery of legal warfare was already grinding its gears. Mike Worthington stood near the door shoulder against the wall. His muscular arms were folded over his tailored gray suit. He hadn't said a word since arriving. He didn't have to. Lachlan sat in the second position at the defense table, flashing grins and prepping documents with performative ease. Norm Bushido sat in the first position. He loomed like a statue carved from pressure and expectation. That was the kind of man who could win a trial with a look and a smear campaign. Mike was third string now. A warning to the others not to step out of line. He moved forward and took a seat behind the rail with the rest of the spectators and several members of the press. Then she walked in. April Howard, wearing a black blazer, burgundy blouse, tight curls coiled neatly around her face. She walked like she had no intention of breaking. She was a step behind her attorney, a sharp-featured woman with fire in her eyes. She leaned back and whispered something that made April nod once, her expression unreadable. Mike hadn't seen April since the hospital. And now, in the courtroom light, she looked more dangerous than anyone at the defense table because she was telling the truth and she wanted justice. Mike's eyes followed her unconsciously. She caught the glance but didn't react. She's stunning, he thought, surprised by how involuntary his thought occurred. She had the kind of beauty that made you pause mid-thought. He remembered a cheerleader he'd dated briefly in college with the same strength, same pride. She was smitten, but this time it was different. April was angry, smart, and she hated him. After the bailiff announced the case, Norm leaned slightly toward the mic. Your Honor, we intend to raise concerns about Ms. Howard's mental stability following the accident. There is documented medical evidence of fainting and possible cognitive impairment. April's lawyer didn't flinch. Your Honor, we'll be ready to address those smears at trial. But April didn't take her eyes off Norm. There was no fear, only fury. When the hearing ended, April gathered her folders with one hand, clutching her phone with the other. A court clerk pulled aside her attorney. April exited the courtroom and walked toward the elevator alone. Mike followed her. He hadn't planned it. His feet just moved. She pressed the call button. The doors opened, and the folders slipped from her arms just as she stepped forward into the elevator. Mike leaned in and reached down, scooping them up before they scattered. Their hands brushed. She looked up, and he met her gaze. I'm sorry, he said. His voice was low, hollow with truth. You should be, she replied, sharply. The elevator warning bell rang, catching the attention of Mike's colleagues standing in the corridor. April turned her back to him, blinking hard. Her shoulders rose and fell like she was holding in too much to say out loud. Mike stood in the elevator doorway, blocking the elevator doors with his shoulders. Behind him, the corridor stretched like a battlefield. April was at one end, arms full, struggling under the weight she carried alone. Norm Bushido was at the other end, flanked by sleek-suited associates and sycophants. He never carried a thing. Mike turned and looked at both of them. His heart pounded. His breath caught. He felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. Mike took a small step, then another step into the elevator, leaving behind Norm Bushido, Lachlan, and the career he'd built for 3 years behind. A few more weeks had passed. Mike had become persona non grata at the firm. He was often assigned to support incoming junior associates. As he witnessed what the firm was planning for April, he reached a pivotal moment. It was a Friday evening. The senior associates went out for dinner and drinks. Mike was not invited. It was no matter. He had a critical task to complete. The office suite was dead quiet. Mike entered the office building, nodding politely to the night guard. He took the elevator to the 23rd floor. Then he slipped down the corridor to his glass-walled office. Most of the lights were off in the suite. The glow of computer monitors painted the space in faint green and blue. Mike sat down at his desk. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then struck the keys. The machine hummed to life. He logged into the internal server. He searched for Howard versus Fair. There was nothing there. Frowning, Mike tried a direct file path. Still nothing. A moment later, a pop-up blinked in the corner of his screen. Access revoked. Permission denied. Mike stared. That wasn't just a warning. It was a wall. Someone had deliberately cut him out of the case files. Mike swore. Then he clicked off and shut the laptop down fast. He knew exactly what that meant. Norm didn't trust him anymore. He was already being forced out. Mike stood and walked to the other end of the hall. Then he saw Amy's station. The screen glowed faintly. A USB drive was sticking out from the side of the computer. It seemed like an unlikely coincidence. He wondered if it was a trap. Mike glanced down the hallway. Then he moved forward. He pulled out the USB and returned to his desk with it clenched tight in his palm. He pulled his laptop out of the bag. He inserted the flash drive into his machine and browsed its contents, case summaries, defense strategies, transcripts, and one folder labeled simply, Cam Recording, Unreleased. Mike opened it. The video was clear and timestamped 8:12 a.m., just before April's crash. He pressed play. There was David Spare's Escalade careening through the red light. It was undeniable. David Spare was drunk, caught in the act on video. The police report did not matter. A jury would believe their eyes. The video had been suppressed. Mike exhaled slowly and copied everything except the video. That file he moved separately onto his laptop drive. Mike heard a door close somewhere nearby. He removed both USBs and turned off his laptop. He gathered his briefcase and jacket with mechanical speed. He used a handkerchief to return Amy's flash drive. Then he took the stairs. Not the elevator. It was best to use the stairs when you're doing something you shouldn't. The parking garage was nearly empty. He locked the doors the moment he slid into the car. He placed his satchel in the passenger seat. Mike leaned back and covered his mouth with one hand. If Norm knew he had this, he would be out of a job. But for the first time in years, Mike felt alive. Terrified, but awake. He turned the key and started his car. Then he moved forward. As the evening progressed, a storm had begun. Across town, the light from the street lamp bled through the blinds in horizontal lines, tracing across April's face as she sat curled on the sofa, half asleep, her laptop humming softly nearby. An email about her dissertation glowed on the screen. Revisions requested, 21. Deadline, 10 days. For April, her remaining mental capacity was near zero. Her attorney had warned her this would happen, the scrutiny, the delay tactics. Now that the trial was drawing near, her academic committee had suddenly decided her previously approved work needed clarity. Translation: someone had whispered in their ears. She had barely slept in 3 nights. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw courtroom walls and the date April 12th blinking on the calendar. Her stomach ached from tension. Her jaws clenched when she did sleep. April stood, stretching, and walked toward the kitchen. That's when she saw it, a flick of light. Then a car door shut, muffled and final. Footsteps on the porch. She froze. There was no knock. Just a shadow standing beyond her view. April peeked through, heart fluttering. It was Mike Worthington. He looked undone, haggard. His shirt was untucked, his tie askew. Dark circles under his eyes. The clean-cut soldier of Donaldson and Bushido had been replaced by someone raw and earnest. She opened the door just enough to block most of her body behind it. "What do you want?" she asked, voice cool. He didn't flinch. He simply held out his hand. In his palm there was a flash drive, black and unlabeled. "I want to help," he said. She looked at it, then at him. He didn't move, didn't explain. April reached forward slowly and took it from his hand. Their fingers brushed for the briefest moment. There was warmth in it. Tension. Not the cloying, manipulative tension she'd come to expect from powerful men, something more fragile. Human. He leaned forward, but only slightly. Not a kiss. Just presence, hovering, conflicted. He wanted to touch her. She could feel it. But he didn't. Instead, she touched his cheek lightly. Her fingertips against rough stubble. "I'm sorry," she whispered. She didn't even know what for. Maybe that he had to live like this. Maybe because he'd waited so long to do the right thing. He closed his eyes for half a second, nodding once. Then he turned and walked away. Down the steps. Past his luxury car. Into the darkness. April closed the door quickly, with the flash drive clutched in her palm like a secret. April looked over her shoulder as though she feared being discovered. Then she inserted the flash drive, slowly trusting that it was safe to view. She did not question Mike's intentions. She could sense that something had shifted in the man. They were no longer enemies. They were now allies. The files loaded slowly, dense folders, timestamps, correspondence logs, testimony drafts. Then she saw it. Camera recording, unreleased. She clicked. Then, as she watched, her hand covered her mouth. On the screen, David's fare had run the red light. He was stumbling out of the car, oblivious to the damage. He was drunk and caught on camera this time. There was no way Fare would buy his way out of this case. She leaned back in her chair, eyes closed, hands trembling. For the first time in weeks, April felt a shift in the world. It was not safety, not victory, but possibilities. Justice wasn't elusive anymore. It had a heartbeat and it was alive and well. The following Monday, the courtroom held its breath as the truth was revealed. April sat stiff-backed in her seat, fingers laced tightly in her lap. Her suit jacket felt too tight. Her mouth was dry. But her eyes were fixed on the screen as the video played for the jury. There it was, David's fair silver Escalade running the red light. The frame-by-frame footage left no room for narrative gymnastics. He stumbled out of the driver's seat. The disorientation. The obvious signs of intoxication. The jury watched silently. At the defense table, Norm Bushido stood slowly. He glanced at Mike and glared. Objection. This exhibit was not disclosed in discovery. This is a clear violation. April's attorney raised her hand calmly. Your Honor, we've included a signed affidavit from Mr. Worthington of Donaldson and Bushido, who submitted this evidence voluntarily. We move to include it on grounds of public safety and prosecutorial integrity. The judge's gaze moved to Mike Worthington. Mr. Worthington, the judge said. Come forward. Mike stood. Tall. Straight-backed. No suit jacket. Just a clean shirt and truth on his shoulders. Did you provide this video? Yes, Your Honor. You did this knowing it had not been disclosed by your team? Yes. Why? Mike looked at April. Because hiding it would have been an ethical violation. The truth matters more than winning. There was a long pause. Then the judge nodded. Let the record show that Mr. Worthington's conduct, while in violation of court procedure, was in accordance with ethical obligations outlined by the Virginia Bar Association. I commend his courage. He turned and looked at Mike. Mr. Worthington, your disclosure will be protected by Virginia Legal Code number 223,011, which prevents retaliation against whistleblowers. The law is on your side, Mr. Worthington. I will be keeping an eye on your career. The judge looked at Norm Bushido and instructed the clerk to make a filing on Mike's behalf. Mike nodded and looked at his boss. Norm Bushido didn't speak. His jaw clenched hard enough to crack granite. The verdict came later that week. Liability, David Fair. April was awarded full replacement of her vehicle, her legal fees, damages for her physical injuries, and a public written apology in the Richmond Post front page. April had asked only for the truth and a car. The judge had granted her more. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about the money. It was about being heard, being seen, and justice. Later that week, April met Mike at a quiet cafe with warm bread and too much natural light. She was far more relaxed, as her dissertation committee had reversed their decisions and approved her research. It had been deposited at the graduate school earlier that day. Mike and April talked like they weren't on opposite sides of the world anymore. She teased him once about the firm and the flash drive. He smiled. Best mistake I ever made. When they finished their meal, Mike walked April to her new car. This is nice, he said with a grin. It has to last a long time. Who knows when or where I will find a job. I made some powerful enemies. You will find one. If not in Virginia, then D.C. or Maryland. Mike replied. He leaned in tentatively. April smiled and tipped up on her toes. It was their first kiss and it felt right. Then she got into the car and drove off. Moments later, Mike's phone rang. Is this Mike Worthington? A voice asked. The caller had a French accent. Yes, this is Mike Worthington. He paused, but I'm not answering questions. Good, the voice said. Because I don't have any. I have an offer. Mike frowned. Who is this? My name's Gille Chancellor. I heard about the case. I saw what you did. I need legal counsel, someone with a spine and a conscience. I'd like to talk. Are you free tomorrow? I don't have a job anymore, Mike replied. I can meet today. Gille gave Mike the directions. Once again, he was driving down Interstate 64 towards something he didn't yet understand but knew was right. Mike got off the highway close to the walkway he had visited the day he met April. Gille Chancellor's house reflected quiet wealth, slate gray stone, polished wood, no flash. Just intention. Mike Worthington and Gille Chancellor talked for 2 hours. They discussed contracts, ethics, green business, the kind of law that created things, not instead of burying people. They discussed contracts, ethics, Green business. The kind of law that created things instead of burying people. When Mike left, he had a handshake agreement and a beginning. He planned to prepare the retainer contract as soon as he got home. Mike's ethics had unintentionally led to a new path for his career. He was starting his own law firm. Gille Chancellor and Premier Organics would be his first clients. And for the first time in years, Mike Worthington wasn't cleaning up the mess of a dysfunctional rich kid. He was building something clean from the ground up. Across town, April stood at her window that night. Lily was asleep upstairs. A new car sat in the driveway, and a copy of her completed dissertation was printed and bound on the desk. She was surprised by the shift the case had taken in her favor. She liked Mike. He was a kind man at heart. He just needed to take a stand for justice. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was real. This is the end of the story. Would you have taken the payoff check? Comment below and let me know. Please like the story and subscribe to our channel. Also click the bell to get the latest notifications about new stories. Also check out our Hampton Bay books on your favorite online book retailer.